call to order the meeting of the Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee meeting for Thursday, April 25th. Ms. Sandy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mack.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Wascom.
Here.
Mr. Talbot.
Here. Item 3, review and discussion and recommendations of ordinances. A is to amend section 13-76, methods of reducing flood losses, part 4 by establishing criteria for adding fill dirt to individual lots, tracts, and parcels of land. This item was deferred from last meeting. And let's go over a couple changes. Y'all guys have them in front of you. They're highlighted, they're underlined in red and highlighted in yellow. An attorney contacted me and basically said that on item A and on item A under 1 and item A under 2, where we allow people to mitigate, that we were not giving those individuals credit for the dirt that we were letting everybody else put on the lot for free. Meaning that if you had a half acre or less and we were restricting you to 24 inches, that we told you if you could mitigate it, you could go above 24, but we didn't give you credit for the free, technically 24 inches you were getting ahead of time. And the same thing applied to 36. So the attorney basically said you were holding those individuals to a different standard, and he thought that if we didn't make that correction, it could be challenged. And so therefore, that's why it says above the 24-inch limitation or above the 36-inch limitation. Meaning you've got to establish freeboard in your pond that would be equal to the dirt you're putting on the lot above the 24-inch fill line or above the 36-inch fill line.
That's 2A and B you're talking about?
1A and 2A.
Okay, I see,
Okay? I mean, some of them were highlighted. I don't know.
But it's under B, not A.
Oh, yeah, it's under, I'm sorry, I didn't know the first
B,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, under B, under sub 1 sub A and 2 sub A. And then somebody told me that property, instead of said for the property prove that, it should be the property proving that. So we made a grammatical correction. And then in talking to an engineer, because we've talked a couple different engineers about the compaction, and one of them basically, or a couple of them basically said that given the fact that we're gonna be stacking this dirt, that he felt that the foundation design should be stamped by a licensed civil engineer or architect from the state of Louisiana. So that's sitting there under 7, and y'all can debate that, whatever. Is there any, I mean, y'all had some concerns, y'all wanna talk about it? And if anybody from the public wants to come make some, you know, I know Shane's making some notes he wants to talk about. We talked about some stuff in the back. Bubba, do you have any concerns with the ordinance as it exists? Is there anything you would like to see different?
Yes, there is.
Well, we can't no net fill, Bubba. I know what you wanna do, and I've said before, we're just not there yet.
To do what?
To go to no net fill. I know.
No, I'm willing to go to 1 foot.
I hear you. I think that 2 foot is a compromise that, I mean, we could go to 0. I mean, the problem is the more you limit, the more you drive up the cost of building homes in certain pieces of property. And just in discussing with, you know, I think the 2 foot's a compromise on the smaller lots. The 3 foot, look, Bubba, I wish we could manage our floodplain in such a manner that we could go to no net fill and you had to prove that the dirt you were putting on it came within the same flood zone or floodplain and that you were not impacting at all.
Right.
We're just.
Well, my only thing is, we're doing this to protect the people, to try to keep them from flooding, you know, in the future. But how are we gonna protect the people that's already flooded?
Well,
They can't go back and build that house up if it's on a slab. And every time we go up a foot or whatever, you're gonna be putting more water. That's the only thing.
I agree. I mean, I definitely agree with everything you're saying. But I think what we're trying to do is minimize the impact right now. And in essence, this is not gonna affect as many pieces of property as people might be, you know, you might think. It's really gonna impact older subdivisions and then people with single lots that are just, that are just subdivided out within the community. Big developments that are being engineered and have the impact, the drainage impact study done and they're doing the 25-year retention and they're doing the 100-year look up and downstream, that this won't even apply to them. I'm correct in saying that, Morgan. This really won't apply to them because the amount of dirt on the property is already established. Right. So, what you got, Shane? I know you got a lot, so let's talk about it.
Well, I just want to apologize for not coming to some of the previous meetings, and I got held up at work, but I made it today, and I got a few questions. This is a very, very, very important change to all residential developments in Livingston Parish. Okay, so very concerned about a lot of things, and so I just want to talk about it. Okay.
I agree.
All right. Some of the questions I kind of jotted down, and is this, okay? The very first question I have, and if you don't have the answer, it's okay. But what type of studies or documentation do we have that says this is gonna fix the problem? I mean, to me, okay, hold on.
No, I'm getting somebody to help answer the questions, because we need an engineer up here beside, I mean, I can tell you what I think, but I think, it comes better from her.
Because if you ask me, to me, where you really are gonna fix the flood issues that we have in Livingston Parish is on the front end when you go to subdivide property and develop subdivisions and develop commercial developments, okay? And it's to my understanding that the commercial developments and the residential subdivision, I guess that's considered commercial development, those are already going through an engineering process that has flood mitigation in it, with gravity drainage studies. We recently made some modifications to the stormwater retention, and you were probably the most largest part of making those improved changes, to improve flood issues that we have in Livingston Parish. I'm very appreciative of that, To me, I think we need to take a step back and look at that and see if that is going to maybe solve some of these problems, that we're having with flood. I mean, nobody wants anybody to flood in Livingston Parish, such that we experienced on the east side of Livingston Parish and south side of Livingston Parish in March of 2016, right after we got elected, and then again in August of 2016, I'd say right after we got elected, as councilman. And so I got some more questions. So what type of documentation do we have that says this is gonna solve the problem? Let me say, other than some other parishes and some other councilmen and some other leaders around this state and surrounding parishes saying, I think this is gonna be the fix.
I don't think this is not gonna solve them. Tell me when I'm wrong. This is not gonna solve the problem. There's a lot of things that have to happen to correct the drainage issues. And what happened in August 2016, I don't think there's anything we can do that's gonna correct that problem.
Right.
But what I'm gonna tell you is the net effect of this little pile of dirt and that little pile of dirt and that little pile of dirt becomes significant. Is eliminating one pile of dirt here gonna solve a problem? No. Eliminating tons of piles of dirt around the parish or lowering those dirt will have a net benefit to flooding impacts. The main thing we're going to address is some of these localized situations that are created by piles of dirt. Now, Morgan, if I'm incorrect in what I said, correct me. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, because I'm not the engineer here, but I mean, that's from what I've read and what I've you know, kind of gathered and talking to people, it's not, this is like, you know, one part of a cog of things that need to happen, you know, that's gonna solve the problem. You know, Thursday night, I probably got, in my district, I mean, in other districts too, we probably got 6 inches of rain in a 3-hour period. A 10-year storm is 7.8 inches of rain in 24 hours, which if you calculate that out, is like 3.25 inches an hour, and we got 2 inches out. So there is no way in heck that infrastructure that's designed for 3.25 is gonna take a 2-inch an hour rain. We're gonna overpower the infrastructure, and we're gonna put water in people's yards, and we're gonna put water in the streets. That's just, that, because we can't afford, you know, we've got sins of the past that require us to design one way, to design a subdivision that can handle that kind of water nobody can afford. And so you it's kind of a minimized risk type thing that you come to a standard and say, we're gonna build to this standard. The question that I asked, the question that Scooter asked, is when somebody called, how fast did the water run off? Where, you know, did we have a maintenance issue when it came to the water receding? And then those maintenance issues with the water receding was also a maintenance issue with respect to the water being addressed through the infrastructure.
Correct.
So to answer your question, this ordinance by itself does not fix the problem. But this ordinance eliminates, you know, something that exacerbates the problem. And if you continue to nick at the problem, you eventually make improvements.
Okay, so one statement I heard you make, I mean, to me, we have a bigger problem with maintaining drainage, you know, clearing drainage right-of-ways and streams and all that kind of stuff to get the water flowing out of here faster. You know, I think to me that is more of a focus and more of a concern and more of a reason that we're having so much trouble, rather than people building, you know, putting fill dirt for a house pad.
Look,
You know, so I mean, that's just a statement. You know, to me, I think that before you go limit people to what they can, you know, how much dirt they can put on their property, to me, if we would go fix some of those problems, you know, and maybe re-engineer some of the things that we engineered that don't quite work so well, then maybe you take another look.
no,
You know, so
look, I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, but what I'm telling you is, we have got a problem that is significant. And some of the stuff, I mean, look, there are some areas that should probably have never been built on, that have been built on. There are problems that, I mean, I've sat in Gravity Drainage District meetings where engineers have said, there's really no way to get the water out of here. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, what we should have done was never built to begin with. That's not an option anymore, it's done. So all we can continue to do is make sure that we don't make the mistakes in the future. And this, we know, if you go talk to an engineer, that the net effect is to increase flooding, and the more piles of dirt you get out there, the more it's gonna exacerbate the problem. Am I wrong, Morgan, or not?
Not in a large storm, no, but I do wanna point out, you made a comment about, you know, we do studies on these big subdivisions, but there's a lot I don't see. There's a lot of minor resubs and stuff I don't see, and none of that has a drainage impact study. And that is
Good point.
specifically what they are trying, this would dictate those people in the field, because I don't see those drainage impact
well,
studies.
no,
A single
this
lot,
to
I
me
don't see that.
affects divisions of property that is already divided. I would prefer over this to see a gravity drainage study when you go and you have multiple lots being divided, and that being a requirement. We've talked about that, and catch that flood mitigation on the front end instead of, instead of letting the property be divided, okay? And then, you know, a young couple or elderly couple goes and purchases a piece of property that doesn't really know that much about all of this and no preliminary information, you know, about the requirements of building. And then you tell them that it's gonna cost them a whole lot more extra money to build that dream home, you know. They're not allowed to do this and they're not allowed to do that, and that they're gonna have to be on piers 10 feet off the ground, and that they're probably gonna have to have an elevator to get to their house, you know, because they're not able to climb those stairs. I mean, there's a lot to consider here
Well,
when you pass this ordinance and you take those.
well, we're not changing, Shane, you gotta understand, we're not changing the elevation that you're required to build a house. We're not, if you bought a piece of property and you gotta put it 10 foot on piers, this ordinance has nothing to do with it. This ordinance only addresses the amount of fill you can put. So if that old couple bought that property and they gotta put it 10 foot on piers, this ordinance has nothing to do with that. This ordinance only restricts the amount of dirt that they can stack up on that piece of land.
But think about this. You're saying here that you're limited to 2 foot on half acre.
Right,
What if the house needs to be 5 foot off the ground?
then you put it on piers.
And you're forcing people to climb those stairs and,
I
just totally don't agree with it.
If you
And,
stacked up 5 foot of dirt, they still gotta climb steps to get to it.
and you can purchase property in an area that's not even in a flood zone, that's not even in a low-lying area, and you're telling them they can only put a certain amount of dirt on their property?
Yeah, because the net effect throughout the area, it doesn't matter how, the elevation of the property, when you have rain and you have water accumulate, the net effect of piling that dirt up is gonna displace water elsewhere. I mean, look, I would much rather limit this than to tell the little old lady when she wants to give her niece an acre that you gotta do a drainage impact study to cut that acre out.
Nope.
Well,
Not
I
after,
mean, but wait
not
a
after
sec.
it's divided.
Well,
You
no,
know?
but if we do think about it, if grandma wants to give her niece a acre, that's governed by a minor resub.
That's true.
Minor resub, so all of a sudden you would rather regulate minor resubs with drainage impact studies in lieu of limiting net fill on properties? Because every time a resub comes through Sam's office, they tell somebody they gotta do a drainage impact study, they will run you out of town.
Well, I disagree if there was no extra cost and the parish had a review engineer that could provide that service
But even.
with no extra cost
But
for
wait
that
a second,
gravity drainage study.
a review engineer reviews somebody else's work.
Or-
Wait a second.
Or an
You're a
engineer that
you're a
was hired
review
by the
engineer,
parish.
aren't you?
Or an engineer
So-
that was hired by the parish that could provide that service at no cost.
Well, I understand, we can't, we're not in the business of providing services for free on the.
Not for free, paid for by taxpayers, with taxpayer dollars.
But who's benefiting from that? A limited number of people?
No, everybody.
No, not everybody's benefiting, only those people that are subdividing property and wanna do. Morgan's a review engineer, you're not, design's not your, so Morgan can't go do a drainage impact study, or I guess she could.
Technically, I can.
Technically she
I
can, but
just don't.
her expertise is in reviewing other engineers' work. There's a definite difference between an engineer that's design oriented and an engineer that has a review type. If I'm wrong or am I right?
I could do one, but at Fort Neblata, I only do reviews.
Yeah, so in essence, everybody doctors specialize, engineers tend to specialize, so, that's just one of the things. Do you have something else? 'Cause
I have a ton,
Okay, keep going. Well,
You wanna get people in the audience first?
yeah, no.
Certainly.
Do y'all wanna come speak? Y'all had a question? Y'all wanna come up and address us?
My name's Vanessa Thompson. I live on North Doyle Road. This is my dad, J.D. Thomas, lives right beside me on North Doyle Road. I just wanted to comment, Mr. Talbert, I think you're right in the fact that this is a baby step. just a baby step to help things. Shane, I think you're right that we gotta get these creeks and rivers and all of this, cleaned out. When Daddy flooded, Daddy's been on his place, you wanna tell me?
I've been there about 52 years. This is the first time I've ever flooded. I got 18 inches of water in my house. But I think our problem, one of the problems, and I'm trying to work on it now, and I think Jeff is my man up, I'm in his
R.
district, Jeff R. And I'm gonna tell you what, the water, right now, I could go show you, and the water that's up, Hog Branch is still up high. Tickball River is still up high, but they've been high for the last 2 months. Those rivers or creeks hadn't dropped. Now, around behind my house, I live on that creek pretty close, not right down on the creek, but the tributaries that come off of Hog Branch all come across the road just down below my house, which has already blowed that big cupboard out. It's washing the road now. That's much pressure going out till it's blowed back on the road, and they had to rock it, but it's gonna have to be fixed. But the thing about it is, if I could get that branch, the drainage problem is one of the things. Across the road from my house, the whole bed of that branch is just chock full of stuff. Water can't get out, so it made it blow back. Now it's blowing a hole on the other side for not going out on the incoming, that it's blowing under on that side. But if that creek was clean, if they could just get it from the road coming down the side over there by Jimmy Mizell's property, around through there and come across that road, and I mean clean it, and it's a pretty deep outfit back there, several. It's even cutting you tributaries across there. And this evening I could go show you, and I bet it's not down, that thing has done creeped within 50 or 75 yards of my backyard now, and it's coming closer all the time. But if the creek was cleaned back through there, all the way around and behind the old Brady place, and come back across that road and clean it good.
I think our question is, we've not seen parish workers cleaning
No
ditches,
drainage. I just need a
creeks,
canal cut through there. I'm gonna tell
things
you
like
the
that
truth.
in years. And you're gonna say years? Yes, years. We have trees this big and ditches and stuff.
They grow up in the ditches, and all back through there behind that place, trees growed up in it. Used to, my kids went down there and sat on the side of the road and fished out of that branch on North Door. Now, you can't get up to the side of the road. It's all grew down inside there, and it ain't but just a little old narrow outfit, but it's all the way around like that. Now, if it was cut out, if the drainage, you're right about drainage. If we could get the drainage cut, and that thing bound, what creek goes across Lodge Stafford Road? Does anybody know
Jeff.
what that creek
Jeff.
is?
Jeff,
I'm not sure what creek that is. I
Lodge
know
Stafford.
some of Hornsby ties.
is where he's talking about, is that in Gravity 7?
No, that's 6. That's
Gravity 7?
6.
Yeah, that's what.
6.
6. It's in 6 or
It's in
7?
6.
It's in 6?
I'm in 6
Yeah.
over there. I'm in 6,
We need to,
and
we need to fund a gravity drainage district. There's no dedicated funding or dedicated resources to perform that
well,
work.
if
Well,
I'm
we are
supposed to talk
Livingston
to.
Parish, so why are we not under, why is that not
Okay,
parish?
I guess the thing that,
Great question.
I guess the thing you gotta talk about is DPW is wholly funded from the road contract. I mean, the road tax and the sales tax to the road. It's wholly funded from that deal. And so consequently, there's limits on what that money can be spent for. And if you go look at the general fund and where that money's allocated, the money that's kind of wide open that can go wherever, to be honest with you, they've got one crew working on laterals. I mean, the parish has basically funded one crew with that track deal, and we just bought another piece of support equipment to kind of help that situation along. But it's, to be honest with you, that's why there are 3 funded gravity drainage districts, because there is quote unquote really no money allocated anywhere within the budget to clean those laterals. And it's, I mean, I hate to say that, I mean, but
So
Well,
there's,
who
this,
do
this
we
thing
use?
was always, it was chest deep, just even across the road from it.
well,
But a lot, I'm gonna tell you something else is a problem, I do believe. They go in there and they clear cut this property, and where it falls, that's where it stays. They never clean back out. And so, if we could get, and I seen Mr. Ricks is saying he send you to the mail, and the equipment that he got, he said he's got a swamp buggy. I said, great goodness, thank you, Jesus, the man's got something that can walk them branches and clean them. If we could get in there and clean that out, I don't think you gotta go to the creek.
But are you
but
telling
coming
me
to
that
it.
because we're not in a funded
A
area?
funded drain,
it's not that you don't have, it's not that you can't get cleaned out, it's the fact that
The
that
resources.
swamp buggy you're talking about,
mhm,
is we've got one swamp buggy and a crew on that swamp buggy, and we just bought support for
mhm,
that swamp buggy to make it more efficient. You know, in the fact that
right.
we're able to bring supplies to it and things to it to make it where it doesn't have to track out and can stay
Yeah.
working.
We,
But in essence, yes, everywhere outside of the 3 funded gravity drainage districts, there's one swamp buggy and one support vehicle
Mhm.
that
Well,
that are
I'm
cleaning all
Extremely
those-
limited
that are cleaning all
resources
those laterals.
for
Okay.
80%
And
of
so
Livingston Parish.
when Jeff and Shane and Tab and Jeff tried to put forth those 2 gravity drainage districts, you know, when was that? In 17?
Yeah.
The spring of 17?
Mhm.
Those districts were specifically for
Strictly for off-road drainage.
dedicated funds to areas like you live in to clean those laterals that technically don't fall under the definition of
Constantly and
The road
consistently clean out
that-
off-road drainage.
the road stuff. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's, cause
Well-
I live in Watson, we've got Gravity 2,
Mhm.
John and Bubba have Gravity 1, Tracy back there in Walker's got Gravity 5, Scooter's got 2,
And
1, and 5, and, you know, covering his district. So, the terrible thing is that, you know, a small area, but the most people of the parish have a funded gravity drainage district, but all that area outside of, you know, kind of that ridge that's just west of Walker, east of Walker, everything east of that ridge is not in a gravity drainage district, and has no dedicated funds.
Right.
So basically, the limited funds the parish have is being spread through all those branches. So they probably know that your branch needs to be cleaned, it's just that it takes so long to clean them, and they just hadn't had time to
Well,
access it.
I'm not to say a man who knows about every kind of cleaning and everything, but to me, it looked like a D8 dozer with the right blade on one side, just walking it, come back and cut it out.
Well-
If you just give the water away, I'm talking about this thing is level, it's stopped up all the way, water can't go across the road.
Well,
The
It's gonna
same-
cost maintenance
the
now to
D8
build it.
The D8 dozer thing is a kind of a correlated issue. The reason
Yeah,
we
but
pay
I'm
money
just-
for them track pieces of equipment, so we can get in those
Yeah.
wetland bottoms and work on specific things that are,
Mhm.
that, you know, we can muck and we can take out trash. We cannot expand those ditches.
The same,
Oh,
the
I'm-
same government entity that raised the flood elevation in 2012,
Mhm.
this causing people to wanna build their houses up so high and put all this dirt on this property, is the same government entity that limits the access and the ability for us to clean those canals.
You know, I was out
And
of
that's the Corps of Engineers.
I was out of the flood zone until the flood of 16, the little one really. And I've been there since, I went through the 67, water didn't go in that house. I went through the 83, it didn't go in the house. It did come in the yard that time, but it didn't go in the house. Everybody parked their cars at my place and Mr. Columbus.
Yep.
They pulled 9 cars out of my yard that went underwater this time. It's because the water couldn't get out, is
Yeah.
what happened. It's drain problem. It's drain problem that it didn't get through. Now, I know it was a lot of water. That was, ungodly water. Allison sat over us, backed up, come back, in 90s, in 91, I think. No water in my house. I could sit in my yard and warn people to go through. I watched a car right down there where the cupboard's at. The man wouldn't go back down. I was going down and help him push his truck out. He drowned out. I said, I'll go help you. I'll get your truck. We'll get it out of there. And when we did, he said, no, I'll come back. Well, he didn't come back, and he come back the next morning, and he looked. He seen a little bit of bubble. He said, where's my truck? I said, that little bubble you see on top, that's your truck. It was completely under.
Yeah.
So, all I'm looking for, and look, fellas, I'm not kicking up no stink. I just like to live peaceful and get along, and that's the way it is. But if it was just the drain was clean around that, behind that place, so it would get off of the, Hog Branch back there, around and come on across that road and go where it's supposed to, and probably might not have to be cut 150, 200 yards.
Jeff,
Well, I'm hoping
But
to,
you
I'm
know where
hoping to
he's
get some
talking about?
dedicated resources and
you know exactly
and a
where he's
gravity
talking
drainage
about.
district
Why
established
don't you
soon,
give
Mr.
Sam a
Thompson.
call and find out what-
Yeah, well, but,
Yeah, you know where North Dole and that cupboard is.
did y'all get finished with y'all's questions? I got quite a few more things I wanted to go over.
I
I
think, go
I
ahead, go
wanted
ahead.
to ask real quick too, just during all this, listening to all this, cause we're kinda new coming in here and doing this.
Yeah, I'm
so
brand
sorry.
new to this.
But the Wetlands Act, what happened to that? Could you explain kind of, cause I know people were riled, you know, about Wetlands Act
They
years
used to
ago.
build in nothing like that.
You know, and now like over on 63 where there's supposed to be a big subdivision or something, you know, you look at that land and that all is like just swampy and wetlands. And how do they be able to build on something like
The
that?
Corps, you submit, and you get a permit from the Corps of Engineers, and they allow it if
And over
if
on
it meets
John
certain
Barber
conditions.
Road, they're doing the same thing. They cleared all of that in that
You
swamp.
can mitigate it, you can, I'm told,
Enough money, you can mitigate, you can buy property over here,
yeah,
and
you can-
swap property, you know?
there's
Yeah.
ways to do it. I'm told though that the current administration's been working on that, and I think that there's gonna be a redefinition of, you know, waters of the United States, and I think that in the past where some of these waters that really didn't drain into tributaries, I mean, it was originally designed for creeks that drain into, you know, if you have a creek that drains directly into the Amy River, then it's a water of the United States. You know what I'm talking about? And now we're finding, you know, where you spun the dozer before you load on the lowboy and it holds water in that circle, that they're trying to say that's wetlands. And so I think that they're gonna kind of release some of the pressure on the wetland situation and then make it more difficult once they get a better definition to address some of these other areas that are wet. So hopefully, you know, we eliminate some of the unnecessary wetland restrictions that we have and become more forceful on those wetlands that are really truly wetlands and not let them be impacted.
Could you tell me one more thing, and then I'm gonna shut up? Why does Tickfall River, Shane, you might know, cause you might cross it some, but why is it staying high? And Hog Branch is
wind.
staying
Well,
high?
you know, it might be due to the recent weather we've had.
Well,
but
some people said
I
that.
was told by somebody who floated that river, since we cleaned that river out, that the elevation of that river's actually dropped more than a foot from where it was before we cleaned it out.
Come on, you
Shane,
know,
I also believe it's got something to do with Bonnet Carey being open.
Definitely,
Well,
definitely,
whatever.
because that's all dumping into,
Right now, it's flooding into Lake
good point, Jeff.
Well, it's-
could
it's
be,
the-
but whatever's got it backed up, it's been up and it's not dropped. Now, what surprises me is, I can go out to Tangipahoa Parish, and when I cross and get in Tangipahoa, you can see sand on the bottom or where their drains are at.
That was one of my biggest messages when I was trying to get that gravity drainage district passed.
That's right.
They have a consolidated gravity drainage district in Tangipahoa Parish, and they clean their canals and their lateral ditches on a routine basis. And
Little
that water
Natal Benny Creek, you go out over it,
right through
see the
Tangipahoa
sand.
Parish.
yeah, you
It's-
see the sand.
It's night and day from Livingston Parish
That's
canals.
right, and when I go
We
back.
need help establishing a gravity drainage district.
Yeah,
So what is, advice that you can give us that we can start
see what they,
working on?
When these councilmen decide
We-
they wanna bring
we
this
have-
thing back, whether they do it individually or.
We have a
unified
plan,
or
we have a
whatever,
plan to establish a gravity drainage
then you
district
just
all
need
across
to- you
Livingston
just need to
Parish. It's
support-
coming
You
soon.
need to support them and help them and get out and
hey,
talk
we're
to you.
gonna try to
It's coming.
support whatever help, but you know, the thing about it is, they built mounds above me, they've built mounds down by me, and they built mounds on the other side of me, and they're boxing me in.
Right.
And my
And that's
water's
that's
getting
why we
hot.
try to eliminate these mounds.
And the
And
water's getting hot.
I do believe that what you're introducing, Mr. Talbert, it's a baby step though. I do think that more of it's gonna lie on the cleaning out and all of that. But I
Definitely.
do think that that is a baby step that will maybe deter some stuff.
Okay, a
So,
couple of other
thank
things,
y'all.
couple
Thank
of
you.
things I wanna
Thank
thank y'all so much. It's so good to see y'all again.
I know Mrs. Easton will talk.
So I got a couple of other questions. Gary, you and Morgan, y'all help correct me if I'm wrong about this. But the way I interpret the wording in this ordinance, one of the major problems I have is if you put fill dirt on your property and it's 1.5 feet, less than the 24-inch mark, okay? The way I see this worded, you are limited, you are restricted to the amount of fill for its width and length that you can put on the property that you worked hard to pay for. What I mean by that is you skip down to number 3.
Right.
And it says, fill shall be limited to the foundation structure and shall not extend more than 24 inches horizontally beyond the limits of the foundation before it slopes. Now, what I'm sitting here telling you is that if you have 5 acres and you want to put 1.5 feet of dirt on it, dig you a pond and put 1.5 feet of dirt on it to build you a house on 1/2 acre, you know, and spread it, slope it off so that your yard drains so you can mow your grass after a small rain. With this ordinance, you're breaking a law. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, you're right. We're restricting the amount of fill you can put on your property. We are taking some of your property rights away because you negatively impact somebody else.
Now, wait a minute.
Wait a second. We've determined that the net impact
Now,
of
up here,
piling dirt on
up here in 1A, you say that if I provide documentation and you don't specify what type of documentation, I'm just gonna write me a letter. And it's gonna say that, documentation show there's an equal volume of storage provided below natural ground on the same property as the volume of fill used above 24 inches. So what I'm gonna say is my land is sloped such that where I put my pad, there's a 6-inch natural pond over there, and I'm totally legal.
No, you
No.
gotta
I mean, tell me.
you gotta create.
Where does it say I have to create?
That's what it says. Show that there's an equal volume of storage provided below natural ground. Meaning that the
Well, how
natural.
can you say that that's not but that's not below natural ground
Because-
over there?
Because
It
you
might have
just-
been natural ground one day, it got washed out in a gully, and now it's below natural ground.
You know, whatever it is when you start, it's natural ground. I'm just telling you, I mean, it's easy, Morgan understands exactly what it is, the engineering. If you come out to your property, if you read what it says you have to tell us what the lowest spot on your property is before you start. It says.
Where does it say that?
On A, you have to provide the address, the contractor, the proposed elevation, the base flood, the lowest natural ground for the property, and explanation of how the elevation of the proposed structure is going to be achieved. So to get a permit to build your house, you've got to show us what your lowest natural ground spot is on your property. And then you've got to have documentation to show that you have retention of static capacity from the water line to the surface that will offset the amount of dirt you're piling over 24 inches or over 36 inches.
So currently, and just correct me if I'm wrong, currently, if you're in a non-flood zone, do you have to have an elevation certificate to build a house?
you have to know what the elevation is, you have a certificate that tells you what the nearest.
Well, no, you go to the
No.
permit office, and the permit office has it pulled up. They can pull up the flood elevation on any piece of property in Livingston Parish. And if you're in a non-flood zone today, and I wanna put me some dirt on my property, do I have to have a flood, elevation certificate?
Today, I don't think you do, but you
No,
gotta.
you do not.
But you gotta
So
know
I
what the,
can go
but
in
wait a
there-
second, you gotta know what the base elevation is of the nearest flood property next to you? Is that how it's set up, Morgan?
No. No, they tell you what the flood elevation of the property is, and if you're above base flood elevation, then you're good to go, and you don't have to have a certificate. You can go put you a house pad on your property that you paid for, and you can build you a concrete slab on it.
Well, under this ordinance.
And under this ordinance,
You gonna get you a.
and under this particular ordinance, you're taking all of those rights away, even if you don't live in a flood zone. And what you are saying is, you are required to have a compaction test. For what? A
So-
compaction test shall be required when the footer of the proposed structure, does not extend at least 12 inches into the undisturbed soil.
Morgan,
Okay.
is that standard construction practices?
It is in the city of Walker.
It is,
Had to have a compaction test, had to have flood.
I mean, you gotta.
So
put-
what you're saying is, I'm talking today in Livingston Parish, outside the city of Walker, Louisiana, that if you build a house in a non-flood zone, and I go out there and I put me a foot of dirt on that property, and I hire me a contractor to come out there, and he puts my footings around there, and he digs down to the base, ground elevation, and it happens to meet the requirements of the architect's design for the house or engineer's design for the house. You don't have to have a compact study, and besides that, when are you gonna do the compact study?
As you put the dirt in.
As you put the dirt in, okay? As you put the dirt in, you're gonna do a compact study before you put the form boards on?
Yes.
Well, how do you know that I didn't dig down, 12 inches past the ground
It's not
elevation? then?
Because
You didn't even start digging your foot.
Because the engineer's gonna design the slab. The engineer can design the slab. If you wanna pile 36 inches of dirt up and dig a 4-foot.
What I'm saying is you can't put the
You don't
compact,
have to have a
you
compaction
can't put
test.
the compaction test down and require it if I go 12 inches, if I don't go 12 inches into the undisturbed soil,
That's
until
true.
you give me an opportunity to dig down 12 inches into the undisturbed soil.
No, look,
Do you agree or disagree?
No, if your plans are gonna tell you, when you come in with your plans, you know what your elevation, wait a second.
Your plans
No, the plans are designed, it's simple.
tell you how deep the footing is.
Tells you
It
how,
does not tell you, the plans do not tell, Gary, that's not true.
look, the rules are simple. You're supposed to dig your footing in the natural ground now. All we're saying
You
is
gotta
that.
dig to it. You gotta dig
No,
it
you're
to it.
supposed to dig your footing into natural ground. And if you choose not to do that, then you need, according to this ordinance, you need to have a compaction test. And you can ask any construction engineer around, that is the way to do it. Now, if you wanna take shortcuts, that's fine. If you wanna do it the right way, this is the right way to do it.
Well, all I can
still
tell you
think-
is I
still
live in a
think we
house.
should Stay with 1 foot.
Look, let's don't kill this thing over deciding whether we need a 1 foot or 2 foot.
All I'm saying is you're significantly restricting the rights of the people in Livingston Parish. You need to take your time and let's take a step back. And let's see if the changes we've already proposed make a difference.
To say what? I know
Let's-
there's some,
let-
you
I
know,
know, I'm gonna let Mr. Kinchin
I
talk.
mean, you're the chairman.
We're gonna let Mr. Kinchin talk. I mean, look, so you don't like this ordinance, so
It's not that I don't like it, because a lot of
Look.
people think that it's possibly, maybe a good idea, to not displace that water, But to me, as I ride through Livingston Parish, that the reason we flooded in 2016 twice, look, They didn't change the flood elevation until 2012, okay? We didn't start piling dirt up in Livingston Parish until after 2012, okay? So there's not even enough amount of time between 2012 and 2019 to determine, to me, that this is the problem. You know, I think we need to take a step back.
We've already determined that this is not the whole problem. This fixes part of
I
the
know,
problem.
and you're saying that this is not the whole problem, this is a small fix, but you're greatly restricting the rights of the people in Livingston Parish to build the house the way they wanna do it.
Well, I will
Well,
say
let me
this
tell you
much,
something.
James.
Go ahead.
A lot of this has to do with flood insurance today.
Mhm.
They've got different regulations and everything else on flood insurance now.
That's right.
If you build on a pad,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't cost you as much as building on, beams and piers.
Right?
Why, I don't know, but that's just the way the thing was got it, so.
I don't know either, but what I can say about this is flood insurance is not required unless you're in a flood zone. You're restricting the rights of the people that ain't even building in a flood zone.
You're right, we are. Go ahead, Mr. Kinsman.
I'm not even sure where to start right now.
Look,
But,
I mean,
let me,
I know, go ahead, I know what you're gonna say, but go ahead, I'm ready to hear it. Cause I know
Okay.
I know what your concerns are, I believe.
one of my concerns is I don't elect my officials to take away my rights. I want them to protect my rights. And when I buy a piece of property, I agree, Mr. Mack, 100%. I should be able to do on my property what I want to do within the law, as long as I'm not affecting somebody else. Now, Mr. Harris, when you talk about flood insurance rates, if I go build in a flood zone and I build a 2-foot or a 3-foot mound of dirt or whatever I have to do to get if I get that dirt above base flood, I can loam it out and I don't have to buy flood insurance. But I can build a pier and beam house 10 foot up in the air, but the ground is still in a flood zone and I still have to buy a flood insurance on that house.
Right.
That's not right.
Well, I
So,
agree with that.
so there
Not
again,
right.
we're taking away my rights to loam my property out
If we pass this ordinance.
if we pass this ordinance.
And if you were.
If I have
you
to go
were
above
2 foot-
24 or 36 inches. And the 24 and 36 inches, if you listen to what went on in Ascension Parish last month, their legal advice told them that that is an arbitrary number,
Correct.
and when it goes to a court of law, it's not gonna stand up. So, there's just a lot of things, requiring a certificate, an elevation certificate on a piece of property, especially if it's not in a flood zone. It's already required in a flood zone. I went and picked up 2 permits at the office yesterday. When I turned them in, I had to turn in this piece of paper right here, request for a flood elevation. They looked it up, they told me, you're in a flood zone. On one of the properties, I already had the elevation certificate. I turned it in with my permit application. On the other one, I didn't. They handed me a blank elevation certificate back that I have to turn back in to get my permit. Requiring somebody to get an elevation certificate is already in the permitting process. This is just duplication and overreach. It's not gonna do anything to stop further flooding. So it makes no sense to me to put that in there. Requiring a compaction test on the fill that somebody brings in is not gonna do anything to stop flooding.
Exactly.
The-
Why
And,
is that
and that's
even
what this
required?
ordinance is about, is to try to stop flooding. Now, I don't disagree that putting, as you call them, little anthills here and there and yonder are gonna have a cumulative effect. But I believe that the effect they're gonna have is gonna be so small. And
Correct.
what this ordinance is doing is this going after the low-hanging fruit. It's going after the people in the parish
To the hardworking
That-
poor
that-
people
that-
that
that
can't
don't
afford
even
to
know
hire
this
that
is going
civil
on.
engineer. That's correct.
and is gonna put a burden on these people.
It is.
If you really want to address some of the issues with drainage, just like these people have right here, I subdivided a piece of property in Scooter's, district last February. The people in the subdivision next to me had issues with drainage, so they all showed up at my subdivision hearing because I had to get a variance. Everybody's said the ditches back up when it rains, the ditches back up when it rains, so we're gonna call gravity drainage and get them to clean it out. But this parish council in their wisdom said, no, Mr. Kinchin, you do a drainage impact study, spend $5,000, and what did it do? It didn't do anything to improve the drainage. 4 times over 8 months, I called gravity drainage to come clean out their right of way, and finally, after 8 months and a call from Mr. Scooter, the 3rd or 4th call from him, they finally come cleaned out the right of way down beside my property. There's a lot of other bigger issues with drainage in this parish than passing this ordinance right here that's taking away the rights of people. We're already paying taxes to have drainage, and to get the parish to do a review, even though everybody may be having to pay their taxes for it. I don't have kids in school, but I still gotta pay school taxes. So if I gotta help pay some people's review on their property, that's part of the game, but don't take my rights away.
That's right.
Well,
And don't raise the price of it to where people can't afford to build the house that they wanna build.
to expedite this, unless there's more to be said, I'll make a motion, that, you know, we as a parish council have just, implemented through Mr. Garlinghouse's prompting, a, master plan committee for the entire parish. That master plan committee is fixing to look at future development and growth in residential and commercial. And they're gonna look at a master drainage plan for this parish, and they're gonna present that stuff to this council. This ordinance would, since this ordinance would greatly affect future growth and development in this parish, and whereas the most important aspect of improving drainage in this parish, as these couple, as this man and his daughter, I'm assuming, has said, we could do so much more by cleaning the ditches and getting rid of these undersized culverts, putting the correct size or bigger culverts in these canals. There's so much more we could do to stop flooding. I'd say we, as an ordinance committee, pass a resolution to stop and let this go to the master plan committee. Let them look at it in the big scope of the parish, and then bring it back to the council when they do the zoning and the growth and development and the drainage for this parish. So I put that in the form of a motion.
I second it.
And Sandy, Miss Sandy, you wanna call the roll?
Mr. Mack,
Yeah.
Mr. Harris,
Yeah.
Mr. Wascom,
Yes.
Mr. Towers.
So you gonna send this
Did
to
you
the?
vote?
No,
Okay.
because basically what you're saying on the resolution, you wanna send this to the master plan.
Oh,
You
no, I
wanna-
just,
So we wanna kick the can down the road a little more,
I
that's
know the
fine.
kicking
No,
the
we
can,
really
ain't
wanna
nobody
kick it.
kicking no can.
We're kicking the can, we're kicking the can
Let me
again.
ask you a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Since we're not doing this, these people right here are basically this close to being flooded, major flooding, this close. What stops someone from buying a piece of property from them and building a 10-foot mound of dirt, and is that final straw that floods them, that have been living there for how long? 52 years.
Nothing.
I don't,
But the people that's coming to build there tomorrow, we're gonna make it better for you.
there's no
We're not
evidence,
protecting
Yeah.
these
Oh, yeah, there's evidence.
there's no evidence to
There's
support
evidence.
that that's the reason that they're gonna flood.
That's exactly it.
That's wrong. The engineers sit there and tell you the cumulative effect of those, the
And I'm gonna tell you
cumulative
something
effect.
else. Nobody's gonna be able to pile 10 foot of dirt up.
Go on the road and, Walker North.
We got a motion to adjourn by Mr. Harris,
Second.
second by Mr. Green.
Motion adjourned.
Motion
Call for
adjourned.
the vote?
It's unanimous.
Okay.